She mopped the marble floors while executives laughed at her swollen belly until she grabbed the microphone and announced, "These 3 babies belong to your CEO," while showing the ultrasound. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The bathroom light flickered, casting an unsteady glow across the marble countertop where Maya Johnson stood frozen, staring at the small plastic stick between her trembling fingers. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. Positive. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system in Blake Reynolds's luxury Gold Coast apartment. "This can't be happening. Not now." She gripped the edge of the sink, her chocolate brown eyes meeting their reflection in the mirror, wide with shock, glistening with unshed tears. At 23, Maya had meticulously planned every step of her life: complete her MBA at Northwestern on partial scholarship, secure a position at a top consulting firm, establish financial independence, and only then consider starting a family. A baby was nowhere in her 5-year plan. Maya closed her eyes, memories of the past year flooding her mind. She recalled their first date at Alinea, Chicago's 3-star Michelin restaurant. Blake had ordered for both of them in fluent French, his confidence mesmerizing as he leaned across the table, blue eyes fixed on hers. "Most women I meet are satisfied with their station in life," he had said, tracing the rim of his wine glass. "But you have hunger in your eyes. That ambition, that drive to rise above your circumstances, it's magnetic." Maya had blushed then, unused to being seen so clearly by someone like Blake Reynolds, heir to the Reynolds Technologies fortune, 30 floors of corporate power in downtown Chicago, and expansion plans that made the business pages salivate. What would a man like that see in a scholarship girl from Englewood? Yet here she was, practically living in his penthouse, wearing designer clothes he'd bought her, attending galas on his arm, and now pregnant with his child. Maya splashed cold water on her face, carefully reapplied her makeup, and stepped out of the bathroom. She paced the living room nervously, rehearsing different approaches in her head. Should she be direct? Emotional? Matter of fact? Blake valued strategic thinking above all else. Perhaps she should present this as a challenge they would overcome together. The sound of keys in the door made her heart accelerate. Blake entered, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light, carrying a bottle of Dom Perignon in one hand and a leather portfolio in the other. "Baby, it's official!" His voice rang with triumph as he strode in, setting the champagne on the marble kitchen island. His tailored suit showed no wrinkle despite the late hour. "The board approved my transfer to Silicon Valley. 30 days, and we'll be living in the California sunshine." Maya tried to smile, but her lips wouldn't cooperate. Blake was too excited to notice, spreading architectural drawings across the counter. "Look at this place in Palo Alto. 6 bedrooms, pool with valley views, private security gate. I've put a deposit down already." His eyes sparkled with ambition fulfilled. "This is everything I've worked for, leading Reynolds Technologies' innovation division, away from my father's shadow." "Blake," Maya interrupted softly, "we need to talk." He looked up then, finally registering her unusual stillness, the absence of shared excitement. "What's wrong? You're not having second thoughts about California, are you? Your MBA program allows for transfer credits to Stanford. I've checked." Maya took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Blake froze, champagne bottle halfway to the counter. For one suspended moment, Maya allowed herself to imagine joy spreading across his face, strong arms lifting her in celebration, excited plans for their future family. Instead, she watched his expression transform in stages, shock rippling across his features, followed by calculation in his narrowed eyes, and finally, something that made her stomach clench: cold disdain. He set the bottle down with deliberate care. "That's impossible. You told me you were on birth control." "I was. I am. It must have failed. It happens sometimes, and no, He cut her off sharply. Things like this don't happen by accident. Not to me. Blake moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, putting physical distance between them. With his back to her, voice clinical and detached, he began to enumerate reasons why her pregnancy was unacceptable. This is a strategic disaster, Maya. I'm assuming leadership of a billion-dollar division. The board expects my complete focus. A child? Now? Impossible. Maya wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the apartment's perfect temperature control. I thought you might be happy once the shock wore off. We could make it work. I could transfer my studies, find a program in California that... Blake turned, his laugh cutting her to the bone. Make it work? Be realistic, Maya. He gestured around the luxurious apartment. This? Us? It was never meant to be permanent. The words struck her like physical blows. What are you talking about? We've been together for a year. You said you loved me. And I've enjoyed our time together. You've been refreshingly different. His gaze traveled over her, assessing as if cataloging features of a product he'd tired of. But let's be honest about what this was. You're a bright girl from the South Side who caught my attention. I'm a Reynolds preparing to take his place in Silicon Valley. Maya felt her knees weaken. You're saying our relationship was what? Some kind of experiment? Blake sighed, impatience flickering across his handsome features. Maya, be realistic. You really think you can be part of my world long-term? A black girl from South Side has no place in my corporate future in Silicon Valley? My investors, my board, my family, no one would accept it. The casual cruelty of his words left her breathless. I thought you loved me, she whispered again, her voice smaller now. Blake laughed, the sound more devastating than his words. Love? You were fun, Maya, an interesting experience, but let's be clear, you're a miscalculation, a temporary distraction that could cost me my empire. He walked to his briefcase, withdrew a checkbook bound in Italian leather, and uncapped an expensive fountain pen. I'll take care of this. How much do you need to get rid of the problem? Maya felt bile rise in her throat. It's not a problem. It's our child. There is no our here. There's you, with your limitations and your background, and there's my future. He tapped the pen against the checkbook. Choose a reasonable number or leave with nothing. And if you're thinking of suing me, remember I have the best lawyers in the country. Maya stood rooted to the spot, unable to reconcile this cold stranger with the man who had whispered love against her skin just 2 nights ago. Rain began to spatter against the windows, the spring storm that had been threatening all day finally breaking. I don't want your money, she said, finding strength in the words. I wanted your support. I thought we were building something real. We were building my reputation for philanthropic dating, Blake replied, closing his checkbook with a snap. The board found it charming, my giving back to underprivileged communities. But that phase of my PR campaign is over. The last thread of Maya's composure snapped. She grabbed her purse from the sofa, not bothering with a coat or umbrella. You are not the man I thought you knew. No, you simply saw what you wanted to see. Blake didn't move to stop her as she headed for the door. Your personal items will be boxed and delivered to your grandmother's address. Don't come back, Maya. Security has been instructed not to let you up again. Rain pelted Maya as she exited the building, soaking through her thin blouse within seconds. She stood on the sidewalk, disoriented, as yellow cabs splashed past and well-dressed couples hurried under shared umbrellas. Chicago's magnificent mile glittered with wealth and privilege, a world that had briefly welcomed her, then ejected her without ceremony. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Blake's name appeared on the screen. Security has been notified. Your access card is deactivated. Don't embarrass yourself by trying to return. Maya doubled over on the rain-slicked sidewalk, one hand instinctively moving to protect her still flat stomach. Thunder rolled across the skyline as she hailed a cab with trembling fingers, giving the driver her grandmother's address in Englewood, a neighborhood so different from the Gold Coast that it might as well have been on another planet. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Maya caught a final glimpse of Blake's building. Somewhere on the 30th floor, the man she had loved was probably already pouring champagne, celebrating his unencumbered future, while she sat shivering in the back seat, her world collapsing around her. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message from Blake. "This is for the best. You'll realize that eventually. You were never meant to be part of my world." Maya turned off her phone and pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching raindrops race down the glass, mirroring the tears on her cheeks. The Chicago skyline receded in the distance, the gleaming towers becoming indistinct through the storm and her tears. The cab driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there, miss?" Maya straightened her spine, wiped her eyes, and took a deep breath. "I will be," she answered, one hand still protectively cradling her stomach. "We will be." As the taxi carried her from the wealth of the Gold Coast to the struggling streets of Englewood, Maya couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later she would be standing center stage as CEO of a billion-dollar company, looking into the eyes of the man who had discarded her as insufficient. Rain drummed against the window of the taxi, echoing the pounding in Maya's chest as the cab turned onto her grandmother's street in Englewood. The familiar potholed road and chain-link fences replaced the manicured perfection of the Gold Coast district. Maya paid the driver with nearly the last of her cash, wincing at the cost. One 20-minute cab ride had consumed almost a full day's wages from her campus job. Standing on the cracked sidewalk, she stared up at the 3-story apartment building where she'd grown up after her mother died. The brick facade was weather-worn, several windows patched with duct tape or cardboard. Nothing like Blake's steel and glass tower, nothing like the future she'd begun to imagine for herself. As Maya climbed the stairs to the second floor, her soaked clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin. From behind thin walls came the sounds of a neighborhood settling in for the night, babies crying, televisions blaring, couples arguing. Life, raw and unfiltered. Mrs. Peterson from apartment 2C opened her door a crack as Maya passed. The elderly woman's eyes immediately dropped to Maya's purse, her only possession, then back to her face, questions evident even in silence. "Evening, Mrs. Peterson," Maya managed, forcing a smile. "Girl, where's your things?" the woman asked, not bothering to hide her suspicion. "That fancy boyfriend of yours finally came to his senses?" Maya's smile faltered. News traveled fast in Englewood, especially news involving a local girl dating someone like Blake Reynolds. She'd been the neighborhood anomaly, the scholarship student who'd somehow caught the eye of Chicago royalty. "It's complicated," Maya replied, hurrying past before the woman could see the tears threatening to spill again. She paused outside apartment 2F, gathering her courage before knocking. The door opened almost immediately, as if her grandmother had been waiting. Eliza Johnson stood barely 5 feet tall, her 70 years etched in the deep lines around her eyes. Yet her posture remained as straight as the ironing she'd done for wealthy families for 4 decades. She took one look at her granddaughter, soaked, makeup smeared, clutching only a purse, and pulled her inside without a word. "He's gone, Grandma," Maya whispered as the door closed behind them. The apartment smelled of lemon polish and the chicken soup perpetually simmering on the stove. "He said he doesn't want me. Or the baby." Eliza's eyes widened slightly at the last word, but she showed no other reaction. Instead, she guided Maya to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and said simply, "Wash up. We'll talk after." The bathroom was barely large enough to turn around in, the fixtures yellowed with age, but the hot water was a blessing Maya hadn't expected. As steam filled the small space, she finally allowed herself to sob, for the relationship she'd thought was real, for the future that had evaporated, and for the child growing inside her who would never know its father. Later, wrapped in her grandmother's faded flannel robe, Maya sat at the small Formica kitchen table. Eliza placed a mug of chamomile tea before her and took the seat opposite. "Tell me everything," she said. So Maya did. She described Blake's reaction in excruciating detail, repeating his cruel words verbatim, as if saying them aloud might somehow diminish their power. When she reached the part about the checkbook, Eliza's weathered hands clenched into fists. "He said he doesn't want me or the baby," Maya finished, eyes fixed on her cooling tea. "He said a black girl from Southside has no place in his future." Eliza reached across the table, taking Maya's trembling hands in her own. "Then he doesn't deserve either of you." The simple declaration, delivered with absolute certainty, was the first moment Maya felt she could breathe since seeing those two pink lines. "What am I going to do, Grandma? I'm 6 months away from finishing my MBA. I can't raise a child and—" "You can do anything you set your mind to," Eliza interrupted. "Your mother raised you alone until she got sick, and you've been proving people wrong your whole life. This is just one more hurdle." Maya attempted a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "A pretty big hurdle." "The biggest ones come with the greatest rewards," Eliza replied, glancing meaningfully at Maya's still flat stomach. "Now get some sleep. That pull-out couch is waiting for you, just like when you were little." The next morning, Maya awoke to the sounds of neighborhood children shouting as they headed to school. Reality crashed back with brutal force. She had class in 2 hours, followed by her work-study job at the business school administrative office, but all her books, her laptop, her clothes, everything was still at Blake's apartment. When she checked her phone, there were no calls from Blake, only a text message from the concierge of his building. "Your items will be delivered between 2 and 4 p.m. today." 3 hours later, Maya sat in the Northwestern University registrar's office, staring at the withdrawal forms before her. The sympathetic administrator across the desk kept her expression professionally neutral, but Maya could read the judgment in her eyes. Another promising student dropping out, another statistic. "Ms. Johnson, with your grades, you could apply for a leave of absence instead. The school has programs for students facing unexpected—" "I need to start working full-time immediately," Maya interrupted, pen hovering over the signature line. "A leave of absence won't pay rent or medical bills." The woman hesitated. "Have you considered other options for the pregnancy?" Maya's hand stilled. Blake's voice echoed in her mind. "How much do you need to get rid of the problem?" She thought of her mother, who'd chosen to have her despite being abandoned by Maya's father before she was born. She thought of her grandmother, who'd sacrificed everything to raise her after her mother died of cancer when Maya was 12. "There are no other options for me," she said firmly, signing her name with a decisive stroke. By the following week, Maya had secured 3 jobs: opening shift at a Starbucks 5 blocks from her grandmother's apartment, receptionist at a small accounting firm during business hours, and evening dishwasher at Giordano's Pizza. Between them, she would work 19 hours a day, with barely time to sleep, let alone rest her increasingly sore feet. Her first morning at Starbucks began at 4:30 a.m. The pre-dawn air was frigid as Maya hurried through dark streets, one hand protectively over her stomach. The store manager, a harried woman named Diane with permanent dark circles under her eyes, showed her the ropes with brisk efficiency. "Customers before 6 are either heading to work or finishing night shifts. They're in a hurry and they're grumpy. Smile anyway," Diane instructed, demonstrating the espresso machine. "Memorize the drink combinations quickly. We don't have time for mistakes." By 6:30, morning sickness hit Maya like a freight train. She barely made it to the employee bathroom before emptying her stomach, then splashed cold water on her face and returned to the counter, forcing smiles for impatient executives who couldn't be bothered to look up from their phones. At 9, she rushed across town to the accounting firm, changing her green Starbucks polo for a borrowed blouse in the bus bathroom. The receptionist job was less physically demanding but required a cheerfulness she didn't feel. Still, she answered phones with professional courtesy, scheduled appointments, and filed paperwork with machine-like efficiency. At 5 p.m., she changed again, this time into a black Giordano's t-shirt, and began her shift washing mountains of dishes coated with cheese and tomato sauce. The steam and heat of the industrial dishwasher made her lightheaded, but she couldn't afford to show weakness. By 11 p.m., when she finally finished, her feet had swollen so much she had to loosen her shoelaces to walk home. At the small kitchen table that night, Maya emptied her pockets of the day's earnings, tips from Starbucks, her first day's pay from the accounting firm, and cash from Giordano's. She separated the money into 4 mason jars labeled with masking tape: rent, doctor, baby, and future. The future jar received only a single dollar bill, but Maya stared at it with fierce determination. "That's going to grow," she whispered to her unborn child. "I promise you." Days blurred into weeks. Maya's body changed, her pregnancy becoming impossible to hide by the 4th month. The stares followed her everywhere: judgment from strangers on the bus, whispers from neighbors who had once celebrated her success, pitying glances from customers at Starbucks. Her grandmother said nothing about the long hours or Maya's increasingly evident exhaustion, but she started preparing extra food, leaving plates covered in the refrigerator for Maya's late returns. She knitted tiny hats and booties in the evenings, her arthritic fingers working steadily despite the pain. In her 6th month of pregnancy, disaster struck. Maya returned home after her Giordano's shift to find her grandmother collapsed in the bathroom, unresponsive. The paramedics arrived quickly, but the diagnosis was grim: a stroke, moderate to severe. The hospital waiting room became Maya's new home. Between shifts, she sat beside her grandmother's bed, reading aloud from Eliza's favorite Bible passages or simply holding her weakened hand. The doctors spoke in hushed tones about limited recovery and assisted living facilities, terms that translated to expenses Maya couldn't possibly afford. One night, after her 3rd 18-hour workday in a row, Maya stood by the hospital window watching ambulances arrive and depart, their lights painting red streaks across the darkness. Her back ached, her ankles were swollen beyond recognition, and despair threatened to overwhelm her. Then she felt it, a decisive kick from within, her child, making its presence known. "We're not giving up," she whispered, one hand on her rounded belly. "I'm going to prove him wrong. About me, about you, about us. I'll build something so big that one day he'll look at what he lost and won't be able to breathe." She retrieved a cheap spiral notebook from her backpack and began to write, ideas flowing faster than her pen could capture them. During her undergraduate studies before meeting Blake, Maya had developed a digital security algorithm as her senior project, something her professors had called promising, but that she'd set aside while living her fairy tale with Blake. Now she began refining the concept, sketching diagrams and writing code fragments between job shifts, using the public library's computers during her precious few hours off. The algorithm addressed vulnerabilities in corporate security systems that existing software ignored. Predictive protection rather than reactive responses. When Zoe Johnson was born on a cold October night, Maya held her daughter's tiny hand and made a solemn vow. "No one will ever tell us what we can't achieve," she promised, memorizing every detail of her daughter's perfect face. "Not even your father." The baby girl, with her mother's determination already evident in her strong grip, seemed to understand. In that sterile hospital room, with only a student nurse as witness, a pact was sealed between mother and daughter, a commitment to defy expectations and rewrite the rules of what was possible. When Maya took Zoe home to the apartment where Grandma Eliza was slowly recovering, she placed the future jar, now containing nearly $300 in small bills and change, on the dresser next to the second-hand crib. It wasn't much, but it was a start. In that moment, watching her daughter sleep peacefully in the dim light of the bedroom they would share, Maya couldn't possibly know that her algorithm scribbled in cheap notebooks would one day protect the systems of 70% of Fortune 500 companies, including the company that Blake Reynolds was about to run into the ground. The future jar on Maya's dresser slowly accumulated coins and crumpled dollar bills, a physical manifestation of hope in a life that offered precious little. At 3 months old, Zoe was a remarkably quiet baby, as if somehow understanding that her cries would only add to her mother's burden. She watched the world with curious eyes that seemed too knowing for an infant, eyes that followed Maya around their tiny shared bedroom. Maya's days had transformed into an endless cycle of exhaustion. She would wake at 3:30 in the morning to feed Zoe, rock her back to sleep, shower in water that rarely stayed hot, and rush to her opening shift at Starbucks. Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 2D would arrive at 4:15 to watch Zoe and Grandma Eliza, whose recovery from the stroke progressed with agonizing slowness. "You can't keep this up, Maya," Mrs. Rodriguez said one morning, her lined face creased with concern as Maya applied concealer to the dark circles under her eyes. "You're going to collapse." "I don't have a choice," Maya replied, kissing Zoe's forehead before heading for the door. "3 more weeks and I can apply for that scholarship program for single mothers." The scholarship program became Maya's lifeline, a special initiative at Northwestern that would allow her to complete her MBA while providing childcare assistance and a small stipend. When the acceptance letter arrived, Maya cried for the first time since Zoe's birth, clutching the paper as if it might dissolve into mist. With the scholarship secured, Maya reduced her work schedule to just 2 jobs, the accounting firm during weekdays and weekend shifts at Giordano's. Sleep remained a luxury she couldn't afford, especially as she added night classes to her schedule. Most evenings found her at the kitchen table surrounded by textbooks, Zoe sleeping in a second-hand bassinet beside her chair. "Advanced financial modeling," Maya muttered to herself one night, highlighting passages while swaying the bassinet with her foot. "I can do this." She could, and she did. In lecture halls filled with students who arrived in luxury cars and wore designer clothes, Maya sat in the front row in her thrift store outfits, absorbing every word like a woman starving for knowledge. Her professors noticed. Despite her exhaustion, her assignments were impeccable, her questions insightful, her determination palpable. Sometimes, logistics failed. On a rainy Tuesday when Mrs. Rodriguez called with a stomach virus and Grandma Eliza was having a particularly bad day, Maya had no choice but to bring 3-month-old Zoe to her data security protocols class. "I'm so sorry, Professor Wilson," Maya whispered, slipping into the lecture hall with Zoe strapped to her chest in a worn baby carrier. "My childcare fell through and I can't miss this session." Professor James Wilson, a 50-something cybersecurity expert with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for strictness, paused his lecture. The classroom fell silent as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward Maya. "Ms. Johnson," he said, his voice neutral, "there's a more comfortable chair in the corner. Your daughter might prefer it." Relief washed over Maya as she settled into the indicated chair, Zoe blinking curiously at the projection screen. Throughout the 2-hour lecture, her daughter remained miraculously quiet, occasionally cooing softly when Professor Wilson made particularly emphatic points about encryption protocols. As students filed out after class, Wilson approached Maya's seat. "She seems to have a natural affinity for cybersecurity," he said with unexpected warmth, watching Zoe grasp at his extended finger. Maya laughed, a rare, genuine sound. "Maybe she'll follow in my footsteps someday." "Speaking of footsteps," Wilson continued, "I'd like to discuss your algorithm project from last semester. The predictive security model you proposed has significant potential." Maya blinked in surprise. Her senior project had received an A, but she'd assumed it was merely academically interesting, not practically viable. "Really? I've been refining it in my spare time, but—" "Spare time?" Wilson raised an eyebrow, glancing meaningfully at Zoe. "Impressive. I'd like to see your revisions. The approach you're taking to predictive threat modeling could address vulnerabilities that current systems ignore." That conversation marked the beginning of a mentorship that would change Maya's life. Professor Wilson arranged for her to present her algorithm to the computer science department, where faculty members peppered her with questions that she answered with growing confidence. For her final MBA presentation, Maya brought a fully developed prototype of her security system. Standing before the evaluation panel in a second-hand blazer with Zoe sleeping peacefully in her carrier, Maya demonstrated how her algorithm could predict and neutralize cyber threats before they breached a system's defenses. "Current security protocols are reactive," she explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "They respond to attacks after initial penetration. My system anticipates attack patterns based on evolving data streams, creating preventative barriers that adapt in real time." Professor Wilson sat in the back of the room, a small smile playing at his lips as Maya fielded complex technical questions with the ease of a seasoned expert. After the presentation, he approached her with a middle-aged man in an expensive but understated suit. "Maya, I'd like you to meet Richard Kwan. He's an angel investor who specializes in cybersecurity startups." Richard's handshake was firm, his assessment direct. "Professor Wilson thinks you're onto something revolutionary. I'd like to hear more over lunch tomorrow." Maya glanced down at Zoe, who had awakened and was making soft, babbling sounds. "I'll need to bring my daughter." "Of course," Richard replied without hesitation. "I have 3 kids myself. The restaurant has high chairs." The lunch meeting stretched to 3 hours, with Maya explaining her vision while Zoe contentedly mashed sweet potatoes into geometric patterns on her high chair tray. By dessert, Richard was taking detailed notes on his tablet. "What you're describing could transform how corporations approach digital security," he said finally. "How much startup capital would you need?" Maya had prepared for this question, spending nights calculating minimum viable requirements. $50,000 would secure a small office space, basic equipment, and 1 full-time programmer to help refine the commercial version. Richard nodded, considering. "And equity distribution?" "I retain 70% ownership," Maya stated without hesitation. "This is my intellectual property, my vision." A slow smile spread across Richard's face. "Most first-time entrepreneurs I meet would give away the farm for funding. Your confidence is refreshing." He extended his hand. "50,000 for 20% equity. I'll have the paperwork drawn up this week." Maya stared at his outstretched hand, momentarily overwhelmed. This was it, the opportunity to transform her scribbled notes into a real business. "I accept," she said, shaking his hand with one arm while steadying Zoe with the other. The check, more money than Maya had ever seen at once, arrived 3 days later. With trembling fingers, she deposited it into a newly opened business account for Johnson Digital Solutions. The name felt right, a declaration that this company would be Zoe's legacy. Her first office was barely more than a glorified closet in a struggling commercial building on Chicago's West Side. The carpet was stained, the windows leaked during rainstorms, and the elevator worked approximately 3 days a week. But to Maya, unlocking that door for the first time, her name freshly painted in black letters on the frosted glass, felt like stepping into a palace. "This is ours, Zoe," she whispered to her daughter, who stared wide-eyed at the empty space. "This is where we start proving everyone wrong." Her first hire came from an unlikely source, a recent computer science graduate named David Chen who had asked the most insightful questions during her MBA presentation. When Maya contacted him about the position, his enthusiasm was infectious. "Your security model could revolutionize the industry," he said during his interview, gesturing excitedly in the barren office where they sat on folding chairs. "Traditional systems wait for known attack signatures, but yours predicts mutations in malicious code before they're deployed. It's brilliant." "The salary isn't competitive," Maya warned. "And the benefits package is, well, non-existent at this point." David smiled. "I have 5 job offers from established firms with corner offices and 6-figure starting salaries, but none of them are doing anything this innovative." He leaned forward. "I want to build something that matters." With David's help, Maya transformed her algorithm from academic theory to commercial application. They worked punishing hours, often with Zoe asleep on a playmat beside their desks. The office gradually filled with essential equipment, computers, servers, a coffee maker that worked intermittently, and a mini fridge stocked with formula and pureed carrots alongside energy drinks. Then, 2 years after Zoe's birth, tragedy struck. Grandma Eliza, whose recovery had plateaued months earlier, developed pneumonia. The hospital called Maya during a critical coding session. "You should come quickly," the doctor said gently. "She doesn't have much time." Maya and Zoe spent 3 days at Eliza's bedside. On the third evening, as rain tapped against the hospital windows, Eliza opened her eyes with sudden clarity. "You listen to me, Maya Johnson," she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "I've watched you fight every day since that man threw you away. Don't you dare give up now." "I won't, Grandma," Maya promised, holding Eliza's frail hand between her own. "I'm building something important." Eliza's eyes shifted to Zoe, who was drawing with crayons on a hospital menu. "That child is the most important thing you'll ever build." Her fingers tightened around Maya's. "But your company comes second. Don't let anyone take either from you." Those were her final coherent words. By morning, Eliza Johnson had slipped away, leaving Maya truly alone in the world except for her daughter. The funeral was small, a handful of neighbors, Professor Wilson, Richard Kwan, and David. Maya sat dry-eyed through the service, Zoe sleeping against her shoulder, wondering how she could possibly continue. The company was struggling to find its first major client. The rent on her apartment was increasing, and now her safety net, the woman who had raised her twice over, was gone. That night, sitting alone in the apartment that felt cavernous without Eliza's presence, Maya seriously considered selling her equity to Richard and finding a stable corporate job. It would be safer, more predictable. The morning news changed everything. A major national bank had suffered a catastrophic data breach, with personal information of over 3 million customers compromised. The CEO was on every channel, ashen-faced, promising to strengthen security protocols. Maya's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard until dawn, developing a demonstration showing exactly how her system would have prevented the specific attack vector used against the bank. Ignoring David's caution about giving away intellectual property, she packaged the demonstration with a personal note and sent it directly to the bank's chief technology officer. The response came 3 days later, not an email, but a phone call. "Ms. Johnson?" a crisp female voice inquired. "This is Samantha Reeves, executive assistant to Harold Brinkman, CTO of First National. Mr. Brinkman was impressed by your demonstration and would like you to present to our executive board, tomorrow morning at 9. Maya glanced at Zoe, who was stacking blocks on the living room floor. "I'll need to bring my 2-year-old daughter." A brief pause. "We have a childcare center in the building for employees. She'll be welcome there during your presentation." The next morning, Maya dressed in her one professional outfit, a navy blazer and matching skirt purchased from a consignment shop, and took the train downtown with Zoe. The bank's headquarters towered above Michigan Avenue, all glass and steel and corporate confidence. In the lobby, Zoe became fussy, overtired from their early start. By the time they reached the executive floor, she was in full meltdown mode, face red with frustration. Samantha Reeves, a polished woman in her 40s, approached with a sympathetic smile. "Board members are running late. The child care center is on 17, but..." She glanced at the wailing toddler. "Perhaps she'd prefer staying with you until you present?" "Thank you," Maya said gratefully, bouncing Zoe gently. "She'll settle down with a nap." Within minutes, Zoe was asleep against Maya's chest. Samantha led them to a plush waiting area outside the boardroom, where Maya carefully transferred her daughter to a soft leather sofa. Adjusting her blazer and smoothing her hair, she prepared her presentation materials on her laptop, determination replacing exhaustion. When she walked into the boardroom 15 minutes later to face 12 executives in bespoke suits, Maya carried not only her prototype and presentation, but the weight of her grandmother's final words. This was her chance to build something that mattered. When she walked out of that bank with a signed contract for $1.2 million, Maya didn't yet know that in just 10 years she would be ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange while Blake Reynolds watched her rise from an increasingly empty boardroom. The First National Bank contract changed everything. Overnight, Johnson Digital Solutions transformed from a desperate gamble to a legitimate business with a blue-chip client. Maya framed the contract's first page and hung it in their tiny office, a testament to possibility. "We need to deliver flawlessly," she told David, who was already expanding their prototype for full implementation. "This isn't just about this contract. It's about what comes next." With the first payment installment, Maya hired 2 more programmers, both women with impressive credentials but gaps in their resumes due to childcare responsibilities, a detail that larger firms had held against them. The office expanded to include a small play area where Zoe could entertain herself during emergency weekend work sessions. 6 months after implementation, First National Bank's CTO called Maya personally. "Ms. Johnson," Harold Brinkman's voice resonated through the speakerphone in the conference room, really just a card table with 4 folding chairs. "Your system has detected and neutralized 17 distinct attack attempts, including 3 zero-day exploits that our previous security wouldn't have caught until significant damage occurred." Maya exchanged triumphant glances with her team. "That's exactly what we designed it to do, Mr. Brinkman." "Indeed." His tone shifted from professional to impressed. "Our board is meeting next week with 7 other financial institutions who've expressed interest in your system. I suggest you prepare for substantial growth." That prediction proved prescient. Within 3 months, Johnson Digital Solutions had signed contracts with 3 more banks. By Zoe's 3rd birthday, the client list had expanded to include a healthcare system, 2 insurance companies, and a retail chain still reeling from a costly data breach. The revenue milestone Maya had once thought impossible, $10 million annually, appeared on their books before Zoe turned 4. With financial stability came the luxury of choice. A real office in a renovated warehouse in Chicago's West Loop, actual desks instead of folding tables, and most importantly, a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood with good schools. "Mommy, is this all ours?" Zoe asked, wide-eyed as they toured the new apartment with its gleaming hardwood floors and windows that actually sealed properly against the Chicago winter. "All ours, baby," Maya confirmed, watching her daughter run excitedly from room to room. The sound of Zoe's footsteps echoing through their own space. Not a cramped apartment shared with her grandmother, not a subsidized student housing unit, was the sweetest music Maya had ever heard. The company's rapid growth presented new challenges. Maya found herself spending more time in boardrooms than coding, pitching to skeptical executives who often mistook her for someone's assistant rather than the CEO. During one particularly frustrating meeting with a manufacturing conglomerate, the CFO directed all his technical questions to David, despite Maya's repeated attempts to answer. "Perhaps Ms. Johnson could fetch us some coffee while we discuss the implementation details," the man suggested with a condescending smile. Maya didn't blink. "Mr. Hargrove, while I'm sure you'd enjoy coffee, you should know that the algorithm you're considering purchasing was created entirely by me." She slid her MIT Technology Review feature across the table. "I'd be happy to explain the technical specifications in detail, or you can continue speaking with my Chief Technology Officer, who will tell you the same things I would. Either way, I'll be the one signing the final contract, or not." The CFO flushed crimson. They signed the contract the following week, with terms distinctly favorable to Johnson Digital Solutions. These confrontations became less frequent as Maya's reputation grew, but the pattern remained. She had to be twice as prepared, twice as knowledgeable, and twice as confident as her male counterparts just to receive equal respect. "It's exhausting," Maya confessed to Richard Kwan over dinner, after successfully closing their 20th major client. "Every room I walk into, I have to prove myself all over again." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "You know what would help? A bigger team with more diversity. Not just for the optics, but because varied perspectives improve the product. Maya took his advice to heart. Her hiring practices focused on talent over credentials, creating a team that reflected the world beyond the typically homogeneous tech sector. Former teachers who had taught themselves coding late at night, immigrants whose overseas degrees weren't recognized in America, parents returning to work after raising children, veterans transitioning to civilian life. The strategy paid off not just in workplace culture but in their security solutions. Attack vectors that more traditional security teams might overlook were identified and neutralized by team members who approached problems from unique angles. By the time Zoe turned 5, Johnson Digital Solutions had outgrown its warehouse office. Maya purchased an entire floor in a downtown Chicago office building, the company logo, a shield with a stylized JDS inside, prominently displayed in the lobby directory. The morning they moved in, Maya stood in her new corner office, watching the Chicago sunrise reflect off neighboring buildings. Her desk, actual mahogany, not particle board, faced floor-to-ceiling windows with a view she once thought belonged only to people like Blake Reynolds. "Ms. Johnson?" Her assistant interrupted her reverie. "Your brother is here to see you." Maya turned in surprise as Marcus Johnson entered, carrying a small duffel bag and wearing the weary expression of someone who'd traveled all night. "Marcus, what are you doing here? I thought you were still in Atlanta." Her older brother, who had left Chicago for college years before and built a successful career as an architect, set down his bag and embraced her tightly. "I saw your company featured in Business Insider." He held her at arm's length, examining her with brotherly pride. "My little sister, running a multi-million-dollar tech company while raising a child alone? I figured you could use reinforcements." Maya's composure cracked slightly. "What about your firm? Your life in Atlanta?" Marcus shrugged. "I can design buildings from anywhere. Besides, I've missed 5 years of my niece's life. That ends now." Marcus's arrival transformed Maya's carefully balanced life. Having family support, someone she could trust implicitly with Zoe, allowed her to accept speaking engagements and attend industry conferences that had previously been impossible. It also gave her the bandwidth to focus on growing the business beyond its current success. During a strategy session with her now 15-person leadership team, Maya outlined her vision. "Security isn't just for banks and healthcare anymore," she explained, pacing energetically before the whiteboard. "Every company with digital assets needs protection, which means virtually every company on Earth is our potential client." David raised his hand. "We're already at capacity with current clients. Expanding would require significant hiring. And capital," added their newly hired CFO, Janet Wong. "Our growth has been impressive but organic. To scale at the level you're suggesting, we'd need outside investment." Maya nodded. "I've been approached by several venture capital firms interested in funding our expansion. I've turned them down." The room fell silent. "Why?" Janet finally asked. "VC funding could accelerate our growth exponentially. Because they want control in exchange for capital," Maya replied firmly. "I didn't build this company to hand over the reins to investors who might not share our values or vision." She tapped the whiteboard where she'd outlined her 5-year plan. "We'll grow at our own pace, on our own terms." The decision meant longer hours and tighter margins, but Maya remained resolute. She'd learned from Blake Reynolds exactly how quickly powerful people could discard those they deemed expendable. Her company would be different. This principled approach attracted clients who shared her values. Companies willing to pay premium prices for security solutions from a firm known for ethical practices and exceptional quality. By Zoe's 6th birthday, annual revenue had reached $20 million, with a waitlist of potential clients eager for implementation. Maya's dedication to building her company never overshadowed her commitment to Zoe. School events took precedence over board meetings. Parent-teacher conferences were blocked off in her calendar weeks in advance, and every night, no matter how late she worked, Maya read to her daughter before bedtime. One evening, after finishing the latest chapter of Harry Potter, Zoe looked up at Maya with serious eyes. "Mommy, Jimmy at school said everyone has a daddy. Where's my daddy?" The question, though inevitable, felt like a sucker punch. Maya had prepared for this moment, consulting child psychologists about age-appropriate responses, yet the actual words caught in her throat. "Some families are different," she finally said, choosing her words carefully. "Some have a mommy and daddy, some have two mommies or two daddies, some have grandparents who raise them. We have each other, and we have Uncle Marcus." "But I came from somewhere," Zoe persisted, her intelligence already evident in how she framed her questions. "Did my daddy die?" Maya stroked her daughter's hair, so like her own. "No, sweetie. Your father is alive, but he chose not to be part of our family. That was his loss, because you're the most amazing person I've ever known." Zoe considered this with the solemnity only a 6-year-old could muster. "Does he know I'm amazing?" "He never gave himself the chance to find out," Maya answered truthfully. "But that's about him, not about you. You are perfect exactly as you are." Zoe nodded, apparently satisfied for the moment, and snuggled deeper under her covers. Maya stayed beside her until she fell asleep, then retreated to her home office where she allowed herself a rare moment of anger toward Blake, not for what he'd done to her, but for what he'd deprived Zoe of and himself of. The following week brought another milestone. Maya was invited to present at DEF CON, the world's largest hacker conference. Her session on predictive threat modeling drew standing-room-only crowds, establishing Johnson Digital Solutions as not just commercially successful, but technically cutting-edge. After her presentation, a representative from the Department of Defense approached with a business card. "We've been watching your company's growth with interest, Ms. Johnson. The government has security challenges that align perfectly with your expertise." 3 months later, JDS secured its first federal contract, smaller than their corporate deals but strategically important. It required security clearances for key team members and opened doors to an entirely new market segment. Maya celebrated the contract by taking her core team to dinner at Alinea, the same 3-star Michelin restaurant where Blake had first taken her years ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on her as she raised a glass of champagne to toast her team's success. "To Johnson Digital Solutions," she said, meeting each person's eyes around the table, "and to proving that excellence can come from unexpected places." Later that night, alone in her office with Chicago's skyline twinkling beyond her windows, Maya studied a framed photograph of her grandmother. "We're getting there, Grandma," she whispered. "They're starting to understand what we're capable of." Her phone chimed with a news alert. Maya glanced down to see a headline about Reynolds Technologies facing shareholder concerns after missing quarterly projections for the 3rd consecutive period. A smaller image showed Blake Reynolds leaving corporate headquarters, his expression tense. Maya set her phone aside without opening the article. Her success wasn't about his failure, it was about her vision, her perseverance, her team. For the first time, she realized that their security algorithms weren't just more effective than their competitors. They were fundamentally reshaping how companies approached digital protection. "We're not just in the game," she murmured, gazing at the city lights. "We're leading it." While celebrating her first contract of $50 million with cheap champagne in plastic cups, Maya didn't imagine that in just 3 years she would be drinking Dom Perignon from Baccarat Crystal, while Reynolds Technologies began its downward spiral under Blake's disastrous leadership. The plastic cups of cheap champagne seemed like a distant memory now. 3 years had transformed Johnson Digital Solutions from a promising cybersecurity startup into a technological powerhouse with annual revenue exceeding $200 million. As Maya Johnson gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new corner office in Manhattan, the skyline glittered with promise in the early morning light. "Ms. Johnson, your 9 o'clock is waiting in the main conference room," her executive assistant announced through the intercom. Maya straightened her tailored Armani suit, purchased from the designer's boutique, not a consignment shop, and gathered her tablet. The 40-story glass and steel building that now housed JDS headquarters bore little resemblance to the leaky office where she and David had once huddled around space heaters, coding while Zoe napped nearby. The brass plaque in the lobby now proudly proclaimed Johnson Digital Solutions alongside other corporate giants. The moving process had been exhilarating. 7-year-old Zoe had dashed through the empty floors before the furniture arrived, her voice echoing in the vast space as she claimed corners for imaginary games. "Can I have an office too, Mom?" she had asked, peering into what would become the executive suite. "Absolutely," Maya had answered, lifting her daughter to see the Central Park view. "Someday this will all be yours if you want it." Now, as Maya walked through the open workspace where over 100 employees collaborated on next-generation security protocols, she nodded acknowledgments to her team. Unlike many tech companies with their ping-pong tables and beer fridges, JDS projected serious professionalism, a deliberate choice Maya had made to ensure their corporate clients never questioned their commitment to security. The conference room held 5 uniformed military officers and 3 civilians with government IDs clipped to their lapels. Maya recognized General Patricia Winters, the highest-ranking woman in the Cyber Command Division. "Ms. Johnson," the general said, standing to shake Maya's hand firmly. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice." "My pleasure, General," Maya replied, taking her seat at the head of the table. "I understand this concerns critical infrastructure protection." The meeting had been scheduled just yesterday, a government request that would normally take weeks to arrange. But when the Department of Defense calls with concerns about foreign threats targeting power grids and water treatment facilities, even Maya Johnson rearranged her calendar. 2 hours into their technical discussion, Maya's phone vibrated. The school's number flashed on the screen. She glanced at it, then back at the officials discussing implementation timelines. "Excuse me," she said, rising from her chair. "I need to take this call. My team will continue the technical overview." In the hallway, Maya answered immediately. "This is Maya Johnson." "Ms. Johnson, this is Principal Garcia at Westbrook Academy. Zoe had an incident during science class. She's okay, but quite upset. Could you come in?" 20 minutes later, despite protests from her executive team about the importance of the Defense Department meeting, Maya was signing out her daughter from the private school that cost more annually than her grandmother's apartment had in 5 years. She corrected Mr. Collins about quantum computing, Principal Garcia explained, looking both impressed and concerned. Quite forcefully. Zoe sat on a bench outside the office, arms crossed, her expression a mirror of Maya's own determination. "He said quantum computers can't maintain superposition for practical applications," Zoe explained in the car. "That's wrong, Mom. The new D-Wave system maintained coherence for—" "I know, baby," Maya interrupted gently, navigating midday Manhattan traffic. "But sometimes it's about how we correct people, not just being right." Zoe looked out the window, her profile so much like Maya's own. "He said I was being disruptive, but wrong information is more disruptive." Maya smiled despite herself. At 7, Zoe demonstrated not only extraordinary intelligence but the same unwillingness to accept limitations that had driven Maya forward. "The meeting will continue without me," Maya told her assistant over the car's Bluetooth. "Tell General Winters I had a family emergency and will call her personally this evening." The assistant hesitated. "Ms. Thompson from legal says the Defense Department representatives seem displeased with your departure." "Then they'll have to be displeased," Maya replied firmly. "The meeting waits. My daughter doesn't." That evening, after ice cream and a long conversation about respecting teachers while still pursuing truth, Maya tucked Zoe into bed and returned to her home office to call General Winters. "I apologize for leaving abruptly," Maya began, prepared for coldness. Instead, the general surprised her. "Family first, Ms. Johnson. That's integrity. Your team was exceptionally capable in your absence, which speaks to your leadership. We'll proceed with the implementation as discussed." The Defense Department contract marked a new chapter for JDS. bringing both prestige and unprecedented security challenges. Maya found herself suddenly under scrutiny, not just as a CEO, but as someone with access to sensitive national security information. "We need to upgrade your personal security protocols," her newly hired chief security officer informed her after the contract was finalized. "You and Zoe both represent potential targets now." The words sent a chill through Maya. Success had brought comfort and stability, but it also created vulnerabilities she hadn't anticipated. Within a week, she had a security team vetting her household staff, installing advanced monitoring systems in her penthouse apartment, and providing a driver who was also a trained protection specialist. Zoe, now surrounded by subtle but omnipresent security measures, adapted with the resilience that characterized everything she did. She even befriended one of the security team members, a former military intelligence officer named Sarah, who taught her basic self-defense during weekend lessons. "Mom, watch!" Zoe demonstrated a perfect wrist escape during Sunday breakfast. Sarah says situational awareness is more important than physical techniques. Maya watched her daughter's confident movements with mixed emotions. This wasn't the childhood she had imagined for Zoe, surrounded by bodyguards and security protocols, but it was the necessary reality of their success. As JDS expanded its federal contracts and developed increasingly sophisticated security measures, Maya's reputation grew beyond industry circles. Technology publications began featuring her security innovations, and business magazines highlighted her unconventional leadership style. Then came the call that signaled her arrival at the highest echelons of business influence. "Ms. Johnson, this is Barbara Stevens from Forbes. We're doing our annual profile on transformative business leaders, and you're on our short list for the cover story." The photo shoot took place in her office. Maya posed against the Manhattan skyline in a crimson power suit that contrasted dramatically with her dark skin. The photographer, accustomed to executives who tried too hard to project authority, seemed pleasantly surprised by her natural confidence. "You have a presence that comes through the lens," he remarked between shots. "A certainty that's rare." The Forbes feature, titled "The New Queen of Digital Security," chronicled Maya's journey from single motherhood to technological innovator. The article carefully avoided mentioning Blake by name. Maya had been explicit about this boundary during interviews, but described her experience of being abandoned pregnant by an executive who claimed a black woman from Chicago's South Side had no place in his corporate future. The morning the magazine hit newsstands, Maya's phone rang non-stop. News programs wanted interviews. Companies that had previously ignored JDS suddenly expressed interest. Women's organizations requested she speak at their events. Zoe, now 8 and already coding her own simple programs on the computer Maya had built for her, flipped through the glossy pages with obvious pride. "You look like a superhero, Mom," she said, studying the cover photo. "But why don't they talk about my dad? Everyone else at school knows who their dad is." The question pierced Maya's carefully constructed narrative. She had told Zoe the basics, that her father hadn't wanted to be part of their family, but had avoided details about his identity or the cruelty of his rejection. "That's a conversation for when you're a bit older," Maya said carefully. "There are some things you'll understand better with time." "Is he a bad person?" Zoe persisted, her intelligence allowing her to see through evasions. Maya considered the question seriously. "He made bad choices that hurt us. But people are complicated, Zoe. One day, I promise to tell you everything." That promise weighed on Maya as JDS continued its meteoric rise. By the time Zoe turned 10, the company had expanded internationally, opening offices in London, Tokyo, and Singapore. The security system Maya had coded in those desperate early days now protected critical infrastructure in 7 countries. Zoe's intelligence, meanwhile, blossomed into something extraordinary. Her teachers used terms like profoundly gifted and suggested specialized programs that could nurture her accelerating abilities. At 10, she was already completing high school-level computer science coursework. One evening, Maya found Zoe in her bedroom, surrounded by printouts of code, intently focused on her computer screen. "What are you working on so late?" Maya asked, noticing the complexity of the algorithms displayed. "I think I found a flaw in the perimeter detection system," Zoe replied without looking up. "The pattern recognition has a blind spot for certain polymorphic threats." Maya leaned closer, scanning the code. Her daughter had identified a subtle vulnerability that had eluded her entire development team. More impressively, Zoe had already coded a solution. "This is exceptional," Maya said, genuine amazement in her voice. "Would you like to show this to our development team tomorrow?" Zoe finally looked up, eyes bright with excitement. "Really? They wouldn't mind?" The next day, Maya watched proudly as her 10-year-old daughter stood before senior engineers, confidently explaining her discovery and proposed solution. The team's initial skepticism quickly transformed into respect as they realized the elegance of Zoe's approach. "We should implement this immediately," the lead engineer concluded, looking at Zoe with newfound respect. "This closes a vulnerability we didn't even know existed." That evening, as news alerts about another major security breach at a competitor's client scrolled across her phone, Maya realized something profound. Zoe wasn't just following in her footsteps, she was blazing her own trail, one that might eventually outshine Maya's own achievements. The following week, as Maya prepared for the opening bell ceremony at the New York Stock Exchange where Johnson Digital Solutions would begin public trading at a valuation of $16 billion, a small news item caught her attention. Reynolds Technologies had experienced its third major security failure in 18 months, causing their stock to plummet. A photograph showed Blake Reynolds exiting corporate headquarters, his expression haggard, his once confident posture now defensive. Maya closed the news app without reading further. Her triumph wasn't built on his failure, it was constructed from her own vision and determination. As she stood on the NYSE podium with Zoe beside her, hand poised over the ceremonial bell, Maya felt the full circle of their journey. From the abandoned pregnant woman in the rain to the CEO taking her company public, with her brilliant daughter at her side. While posing for the Forbes cover, Maya didn't know that the next issue would feature a story about Reynolds Technologies' downfall, with Blake Reynolds photographed leaving a corporate building defeated, the company founded by his grandfather losing 60% of its market value in just 2 years. The bell of the New York Stock Exchange rang out across the trading floor, its resonant tones signaling not just the start of another trading day, but the birth of a publicly traded company valued at $1.6 billion. Maya Johnson's hand moved away from the ceremonial bell, her fingers interlacing with Zoe's as camera flashes erupted around them. The moment crystallized everything she had fought for: recognition, legitimacy, and a legacy for her daughter. "Mom, we did it!" Zoe whispered, her 11-year-old face alight with understanding beyond her years. Though young, she comprehended the significance of this day, how their family name now joined the pantheon of business success stories. "We certainly did, baby," Maya replied, squeezing her daughter's hand as they posed for the official NYSE photographs. The trading floor buzzed with energy as Johnson Digital Solutions stock began its first day of public trading, opening significantly above the projected price. Back at JDS headquarters, employees gathered in the main conference room, watching live coverage of their company's market debut on giant screens. Champagne bottles popped open when the closing bell rang, revealing a first-day increase of 23%, an exceptional performance even by tech IPO standards. Maya raised her glass to the team that had grown from 2 people in a leaky office to over 200 professionals across 4 countries. To everyone who believed in our vision when it was just lines of code and determination, this belongs to all of us. The celebration continued late into the evening, but Maya left early, declining invitations to exclusive after-parties hosted by investment banks. Instead, she took Zoe for ice cream at their favorite local shop, a tradition they maintained after every significant company milestone. "Mom, is being public going to change things?" Zoe asked, methodically arranging sprinkles on her chocolate scoop. Maya considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Some things will change. More people will watch what we do. But what matters most, our values, our mission, our family, that stays the same. The following weeks proved Maya right about increased scrutiny. Financial analysts dissected JDS quarterly projections. Technology bloggers speculated about upcoming products. Business publications requested profiles on the dynamic mother-daughter duo revolutionizing cybersecurity. Zoe, now entering 6th grade at an elite private school for gifted students, was developing into a technological prodigy in her own right. While other children played video games, she created them, coding complex simulations that tested security vulnerabilities. One afternoon, Maya arrived at school for pickup to find Zoe in the computer lab surrounded by faculty members, including the high school programming instructor. "Ms. Johnson," the school's technology director approached, looking both impressed and slightly bewildered. "Your daughter just identified and corrected a critical flaw in our network security system. We had professional consultants audit the system last month, and they missed what she found in an afternoon." Maya looked past him to where Zoe sat, explaining her methodology to the high school teacher with the patient confidence of an experienced educator. Pride swelled in her chest, alongside a flicker of concern about the path opening before her daughter, a world that would try to categorize and contain such exceptional talent. That evening, Maya created a dedicated technology lab in their penthouse apartment, converting a spare bedroom into a state-of-the-art workspace with equipment that rivaled professional research facilities. Here, Zoe could explore her talents safely, under Maya's watchful eye. "This is better than the school lab," Zoe exclaimed, running her fingers reverently over the specialized equipment. "Can I try developing that security protocol I was telling you about? The one that detects pattern anomalies before they become threats?" Maya asked, already knowing the answer. Her daughter had been sketching the concept for weeks, explaining the technical specifics in animated detail during dinner conversations. Zoe nodded enthusiastically, already settling into the ergonomic chair designed for someone twice her size. Maya watched her daughter's fingers fly across the keyboard, recognizing the same focused intensity she herself had shown while coding their first security algorithm years ago. 3 months later, Zoe's pattern recognition protocol wasn't just a concept, it was a functioning algorithm that detected subtle variations in attack methodologies before they fully deployed. When tested against JDS's standard security suite, it identified potential threats an average of 27 seconds faster, an eternity in cybersecurity terms. "This is groundbreaking," David Chen told Maya after reviewing the code. Now, JDS's chief technology officer, David, had been instrumental in translating Maya's original vision into enterprise-ready products. If Zoe is doing this at 11, imagine what she'll accomplish by 20. Maya arranged for Zoe to present her work at a youth technology conference where her demonstration left the audience, mostly teenagers and college students, in stunned silence before erupting into applause. Maya filmed every moment from the wings, capturing her daughter's confident stride across the stage, her articulate explanations, the respectful questions from adult professionals in attendance. The MIT Technology Review reached out the following week. "We'd like to feature Zoe Johnson in our Innovators Under 35 section," the editor explained during a conference call. "We've never included someone so young, but her algorithm represents a significant advancement in predictive security." The resulting article, "The 13-Year-Old Redefining Cybersecurity," included a photograph of Zoe in her home lab, surrounded by monitors displaying complex code. The piece detailed her methodology and quoted several security experts who confirmed the significance of her innovation. Maya framed the article alongside the NYSE bell-ringing photo in her office, tangible proof of their extraordinary journey. When clients visited, these images often drew more attention than the impressive awards lining adjacent walls. One evening, as Maya prepared dinner while Zoe worked on homework in the adjacent dining room, the television news caught their attention with a familiar name. Reynolds Technologies announced another round of layoffs today following continued security failures that have cost the company several major contracts, the anchor reported. CEO Blake Reynolds issued a statement claiming the company is repositioning for future growth, but industry analysts suggest these moves indicate deepening financial troubles. The screen showed Blake exiting a corporate building, his expression grim as reporters shouted questions. Though still handsome, stress had etched lines around his eyes, and his hair showed premature gray at the temples. Zoe glanced up from her textbook. Reynolds Technologies? Aren't they the ones who had that massive data breach last quarter? Their security architecture is completely outdated. Maya quickly changed the channel. Some companies don't prioritize security until it's too late, she said neutrally, not revealing the sudden acceleration of her heartbeat at seeing Blake's face. Their CEO looks stressed, Zoe observed casually. I would be too if my company lost $300 million in market value because I didn't invest in proper security protocols. Maya merely nodded, busying herself with dinner preparations while mentally calculating how many years until Zoe might start asking more pointed questions about her father. The girl's analytical mind would eventually turn to her own origins, connecting dots with the precision she applied to coding problems. That moment arrived sooner than expected. Shortly after Zoe's 14th birthday, a thick envelope arrived from Stanford University, addressed to Zoe Johnson. "Mom!" Zoe called, bursting into Maya's home office waving the opened letter. "Stanford wants me. Full scholarship. Early admission at 15. I'd be their youngest undergraduate in 20 years. Maya took the letter with trembling hands, reading the formal offer from one of the world's most prestigious universities, the same institution where Blake Reynolds had studied before taking over his family's company. "This is extraordinary, Zoe," she managed, pushing aside the complex emotions stirring beneath her pride. "Stanford is getting the most brilliant student in their history." Zoe threw her arms around Maya's neck. "It's because of you. Everything you taught me. All the opportunities you created. I wouldn't be me without you." That night, after Zoe had finally fallen asleep, her excitement having kept her chattering for hours about Stanford's computer science program, Maya sat alone in her office contemplating the ironies of life. Blake had once told her she didn't belong in his world of privilege and power. Now their daughter would attend his alma mater, likely surpassing his achievements before she reached 20. The Stanford acceptance catalyzed a flurry of media interest in the young prodigy. Technology publications requested interviews, academic journals inquired about her pattern recognition algorithm. The youth-focused branch of TED Talks invited her to present. Through it all, Maya maintained careful boundaries around Zoe's exposure, approving only opportunities that celebrated her intellectual contributions rather than exploiting her youth. When a major fashion magazine wanted to feature Zoe as a tech princess, Maya declined firmly. "My daughter is a scientist, not a novelty," she told the disappointed editor. As preparations for Stanford progressed, Maya received an unexpected invitation. The Tech Summit America Organizing Committee wanted both her and Zoe to present at their annual conference in New York. "We envision you delivering the keynote on the future of cybersecurity," the invitation specified, followed by a special demonstration of Zoe's breakthrough algorithm. "This mother-daughter presentation would be unprecedented in our 20-year history." Maya discussed the opportunity with Zoe over dinner that evening. It would mean presenting to over 500 industry leaders, CEOs, government officials, investors. The pressure would be intense. Zoe considered this while methodically separating components of her salad, a habit she'd had since childhood. Stanford would be impressed, wouldn't they, if I presented at Tech Summit before even starting classes? "Undoubtedly," Maya agreed. "But only if you're comfortable with that level of scrutiny." "I am," Zoe replied with characteristic certainty. "Besides, we'll be together. We're unbeatable as a team." As they finalized plans for the Tech Summit presentation, Maya made a decision she'd been contemplating for months. After the conference, once Zoe had demonstrated her brilliance to the world, Maya would finally tell her daughter the complete truth about Blake Reynolds. Who he was, what he'd said, how he'd abandoned them. At 15, preparing to enter university, Zoe deserved to know her full history. "After your presentation at the Tech Summit America, we'll have that conversation," Maya promised when Zoe asked yet again about her father during a rare, vulnerable moment. "You'll know everything then." The night before they were scheduled to depart for New York, Maya found Zoe in her technology lab, making final adjustments to her demonstration. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Maya asked, watching her daughter's confident movements among the equipment. "Almost," Zoe replied, tucking a strand of curly hair behind her ear, a gesture so like Maya's own. "I've added a live attack simulation to show how the algorithm detects and neutralizes threats in real time." Maya smiled, wrapping an arm around Zoe's shoulders. "You've accomplished more at 14 than most people do in a lifetime." Zoe leaned into the embrace. "You realized all that he said would be impossible," she replied softly, intuiting the unspoken comparison to the father she'd never met. As Maya approved Zoe's participation in the prestigious Tech Summit America, she couldn't imagine that Blake Reynolds would also be there, desperate to save his failing company, about to come face-to-face with the woman and daughter he had abandoned. The black town car glided through Manhattan's early morning traffic, its tinted windows shielding Maya from the first rays of sunlight breaking over the skyscrapers. Inside, she reviewed her presentation notes one final time, occasionally glancing at Zoe, who sat beside her typing furiously on her laptop. "Final adjustments?" Maya asked, watching her daughter's intense focus. "Just optimizing the attack simulation," Zoe replied without looking up. "I want it to be perfect." The Tech Summit America was 3 weeks away, and preparation had consumed their lives. Maya's keynote address, "The Future of Security in an Interconnected World," would open the prestigious conference, immediately followed by Zoe's demonstration of her groundbreaking algorithm. It was a platform that could launch Zoe's independent career before she even began at Stanford. Back at JDS headquarters, a dedicated team of 20 staff members worked exclusively on perfecting every aspect of their appearance. The marketing department created stunning visuals, speechwriters refined key messages, technical staff ensured Zoe's demonstration would function flawlessly on the summit systems. "I want Zoe's algorithm to be the story everyone's talking about after the conference," Maya instructed her team during their morning briefing. "This isn't just about our company, it's about introducing the world to the next generation of cybersecurity innovation." Caroline Martinez, Maya's chief of staff, nodded while reviewing the attendee list on her tablet. "We've confirmed RSVPs from CTOs of 87 Fortune 500 companies, plus representatives from 14 government agencies." Maya scanned the document, noting key names she wanted to connect with after her presentation. As she scrolled through the alphabetical listing, a name caused her finger to freeze mid-motion. Reynolds, Blake, CEO, Reynolds Innovation. Her heart stuttered before resuming at double speed. "Something wrong?" Caroline asked, noticing Maya's sudden tension. Maya quickly scrolled past the name. "No, just making mental notes of priority connections." She passed the tablet back, her composure restored through years of practice hiding vulnerability. "Let's discuss the seating arrangements for the VIP reception." Later that evening, alone in her office with the Manhattan skyline twinkling beyond her windows, Maya pulled up Blake Reynolds' company profile. Reynolds Technologies had been rebranded as Reynolds Innovation 3 years ago, a transparent attempt to distance the struggling company from its recent failures. The stock had lost 62% of its value in 30 months, and industry publications reported 2 rounds of major layoffs. The company website still featured Blake prominently, his once youthful face now showing signs of strain, though his official biography remained filled with superlatives about visionary leadership and cutting-edge innovation. Maya closed the browser window, pushing away memories that still had the power to sting 15 years later. She hadn't anticipated Blake would attend the tech summit. The once mighty Reynolds name had diminished in tech circles, their products considered outdated, their security protocols repeatedly breached. What was he hoping to achieve by attending the industry's premier event? Maya considered contacting the conference organizers to ensure Blake wouldn't have access to any events where she and Zoe would appear, then dismissed the idea. She wouldn't give him the power to disrupt her plans. After 15 years of building her empire, Maya Johnson feared no confrontation, especially not with the man who had once deemed her unworthy. "Mom?" Zoe's voice startled her from the doorway. "I've finished the simulation coding. Want to see it?" Maya smiled, grateful for the interruption of her thoughts. "Absolutely." Across town, in a considerably smaller office with a view of a brick wall rather than the skyline, Blake Reynolds stared at his computer screen, reviewing the Tech Summit America agenda for the 5th time that day. The conference represented perhaps his last opportunity to save Reynolds' innovation from complete collapse. "3 potential investors have agreed to meet with us there," his assistant explained, placing a stack of reports on his desk. "And Nakamura from Tokyo might consider the joint venture if your presentation impresses him." Blake nodded absently, his attention caught by the highlighted keynote speaker, Maya Johnson, CEO, Johnson Digital Solutions. The conference organizers had added a special note, followed by a demonstration of next-generation threat detection by programming prodigy Zoe Johnson, age 14. His mouth went dry. He had avoided direct contact with Maya for 15 years, watching her rise from afar with a complex mixture of emotions he refused to examine closely. But now, seeing their names, Maya and Zoe Johnson, side by side on the industry's most prestigious program, the weight of his past choices pressed against his chest like a physical force. "Sir?" his assistant prompted. "The board wants your presentation draft by tomorrow morning." Blake cleared his throat. "Yes, of course. I'll have it ready." After his assistant left, Blake opened a browser and searched for images of Zoe Johnson. There weren't many. Maya had clearly protected her daughter's privacy, but a recent article in MIT Technology Review included a photograph of a teenage girl with caramel-colored skin, curly hair pulled into a neat bun, and intelligent eyes that seemed hauntingly familiar. His daughter, the child he had rejected before birth. The girl whose existence he had once called a strategic disaster. Blake closed the browser and reached for the bottle of antacids he now kept permanently on his desk. The tech summit was 3 weeks away, and he had a sinking feeling that his carefully constructed life was about to implode. The days before the conference passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Maya's team transformed their presentation into a multimedia experience designed to cement JDS's position as the industry leader. Stylists were consulted about what both Maya and Zoe would wear: power and sophistication for Maya, professional but age-appropriate elegance for Zoe. "The red Valentino for your keynote," the stylist suggested, holding up a striking sheath dress. "It projects confidence and commands attention." Maya nodded her approval. For Zoe, they selected a tailored navy suit that made her look both professional and appropriately youthful. "Will there be photographers?" Zoe asked, examining her reflection with mild interest rather than vanity. "Dozens," Maya confirmed. "This is the most prestigious tech gathering in America. Everything we do there will be documented." 3 days before the conference, Maya finally addressed the possibility she had been avoiding. "Zoe," she began during their evening meal, "there's something you should know before the summit." Zoe looked up from her plate, immediately alert to the change in her mother's tone. "Your father might be there," Maya said simply. Zoe's fork paused midway to her mouth. "My father? You mean, you know he'll be attending?" "His name is on the participant list," Maya explained. "He runs a technology company called Reynolds Innovation." "Blake Reynolds is my father?" Zoe asked, her quick mind immediately making the connection. "The one whose company keeps having security breaches?" Maya nodded, watching her daughter's face carefully. Yes, I plan to tell you everything after the conference, but I don't want you blindsided if we encounter him. Zoe set down her fork, processing this information with the methodical thoroughness she applied to coding problems. Does he know about me? That I'm his daughter? He knew I was pregnant, Maya replied carefully. He chose not to be involved. Zoe nodded slowly. That's why you created the security protocols for me at public events. It wasn't just because I'm your daughter or because of JDS. It was because of him specifically. Maya shouldn't have been surprised by her daughter's perceptiveness. Partly, yes. I've never been certain how he might react if he discovered who you've become. A potential threat to be managed, Zoe said with unsettling maturity. I understand. You're not just my daughter, Zoe. You're a Johnson. You're extraordinary in your own right, Maya said fiercely. After the summit, we'll have a longer conversation about everything. I promise. Meanwhile, Blake Reynolds prepared for the conference with the desperate energy of a drowning man grasping for a lifeline. Reynolds' innovation needed either a major partnership or significant investment to survive another year. His presentation, Reimagining Connected Experiences, had been rewritten 14 times, each version attempting to recapture the visionary spirit that had once made him the golden boy of Silicon Valley. The night before his departure for New York, Blake stood in his closet, surveying the suits that hung too loosely on his frame. 5 years of corporate decline had taken their toll physically as well as financially. He selected his best remaining suit, a Tom Ford he'd purchased during better days, and packed it carefully. His phone chimed with a message from the board chairman. Nakamura meeting confirmed for day 2 of summit. This may be our last chance. Don't mess it up. Blake stared at the message, pressure building behind his temples. The days when Reynolds had been a company that could dictate terms were long gone. Now they were supplicants, hoping for mercy from potential partners who had once courted them. As he packed his presentation materials, Blake found himself returning to the conference agenda, staring at Maya's name, wondering what she would say if they came face to face after 15 years. Would she acknowledge him? Ignore him? Have security remove him? And Zoe? What would it feel like to see his daughter in person? The girl whose existence he had once offered to pay to terminate? The morning of the tech summit dawned bright and clear in Manhattan. In her penthouse apartment, Maya stood before her floor-length mirror, the red Valentino dress cutting a striking silhouette against her dark skin. 15 years had only enhanced her beauty, adding a gravitas and confidence that no designer could manufacture. "You look incredible, Mom," Zoe said from the doorway, already dressed in her navy suit, her curly hair styled in a sophisticated updo that made her look older than her 14 years. "So do you," Maya replied, taking in her daughter's poised appearance. Ready to revolutionize cybersecurity? Zoe grinned, the rare flash of teenage enthusiasm breaking through her usual composed demeanor. Born ready. As their driver navigated toward the Four Seasons Hotel where the summit was being held, Maya reviewed their schedule one final time. Her keynote would open the conference at 9:30, followed immediately by Zoe's demonstration. The remainder of the day included VIP lunch, media interviews, and potential partnership discussions with 3 major technology corporations interested in licensing Zoe's algorithm. "Remember," Maya said as the car approached the hotel, "no matter what happens today, what matters most is what we've built together. No one can take that from us." Zoe nodded, understanding the subtext. If they encountered Blake Reynolds today, it would change nothing about who they were or what they had accomplished. Across town, Blake adjusted his tie in the mirror of his significantly less luxurious hotel room. The suit that had once fit perfectly now hung slightly loose at the shoulders, a physical manifestation of his diminished status. He swallowed another antacid tablet, washed down with lukewarm coffee, and gathered his presentation materials. His car service, no longer a private driver but a standard rideshare, dropped him at the service entrance of the Four Seasons due to the crowd of media at the main entrance. As he made his way through the back corridors toward the registration desk, Blake steeled himself for the day ahead, unaware that within hours his past and present were about to collide with devastating force. On the eve of the Tech Summit America, Maya adjusted the red dress she had chosen to dominate the stage, unaware that just 10 blocks away, Blake Reynolds stared at his worn suit, rehearsing words of apology he had hoped never to say. The Four Seasons Hotel gleamed under the morning sun, its elegant facade serving as the backdrop for a steady stream of Blacktown cars depositing tech industry elites onto the red carpet. Photographers jostled for position, their cameras trained on arriving CEOs and venture capitalists who typically shunned publicity but made exceptions for the Tech Summit America. Maya and Zoe Johnson emerged from their limousine with practiced grace, their entrance immediately triggering a frenzy of flashing cameras. Maya's red Valentino dress commanded attention against the sea of dark suits, while Zoe's tailored navy ensemble struck the perfect balance between youthful brilliance and professional composure. "Ms. Johnson, over here!" photographers called, competing for their attention as mother and daughter paused briefly at the designated photo spot. They smiled with identical confidence, not the manufactured smiles of people seeking approval, but the genuine expression of those who knew their worth. "Ready?" Maya asked quietly, placing a protective hand on Zoe's shoulder. Zoe nodded, her eyes bright with anticipation rather than nerves. "Let's show them what real innovation looks like." As they entered the grand ballroom, the effect was immediate. Conversations paused, heads turned, and a subtle ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. Maya Johnson was not just another CEO, she was the headline act, the reason many attendees had paid the exorbitant registration fee. And the young woman beside her, already generating buzz in tech circles, amplified their collective star power. "Maya, wonderful to see you," called Diane Farrell, CEO of MicroSecure, approaching with outstretched hands. "Your keynote is the talk of the conference." "Diane, thank you," Maya replied warmly, accepting the greeting before smoothly introducing Zoe. "I believe you've read about my daughter's work on predictive pattern recognition?" Diane turned to Zoe with genuine interest. "The MIT Tech Review piece was fascinating. I'd love to hear more about your anomaly detection parameters." While Zoe engaged in technical conversation that would challenge most doctoral candidates, Maya scanned the room with the situational awareness she'd cultivated over years of being the only black woman in countless executive settings. Her security team maintained discreet positions near each entrance, their earpieces barely visible. Across the ballroom, Blake Reynolds entered alone, his entrance lacking the fanfare that had once been standard for the Reynolds name. His Tom Ford suit, though still expensive, hung slightly loose around his shoulders. The confident stride that had once parted crowds had diminished to the careful walk of a man trying to avoid notice. Blake accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, using the moment to survey the room. The Tech Summit had always been a celebration of innovation's brightest stars, a category that once automatically included him. Now he moved through the space like a ghost, recognized but not acknowledged, present but not welcomed. His gaze drifted across the room, past clusters of animated conversations and potential investors he hoped to impress, until it fixed on a woman in red commanding attention at the center of the room. Even from a distance, something about her posture, the tilt of her head as she listened, the controlled grace of her gestures, triggered a sense of recognition. The realization hit Blake with physical force. Maya Johnson. His fingers loosened involuntarily, sending the champagne flute crashing to the marble floor. The sound of shattering crystal created a momentary lull in nearby conversations as heads turned toward the disturbance. "Sir, are you all right?" A server appeared with a towel and dustpan, quickly addressing the small puddle of champagne and broken glass. Blake barely registered the question. His eyes remained fixed on Maya, taking in the transformation 15 years had wrought. The uncertain student he had discarded had become this commanding presence, radiating the quiet confidence that came from building something substantial. Nothing remained of the vulnerable young woman who had stood in his apartment in the rain. As the server cleaned up the broken glass, Blake noticed the younger woman at Maya's side. Tall for her age, with skin several shades lighter than Maya's, her curly hair arranged in a sophisticated updo. She gestured animatedly while explaining something to an enthralled group of executives, her mannerisms eerily familiar. Blake felt his heart stutter as recognition dawned. He watched the girl tilt her head slightly to the right while asking a question, his own unconscious habit when pursuing a line of inquiry, the shape of her face, the set of her eyes. "Mr. Reynolds? Sir? Is everything okay?" The server's voice finally penetrated his shock. "Yes, fine," Blake managed, his mouth suddenly dry. "Thank you." As the server departed, a familiar voice nearby startled Blake from his trance. "Blake Reynolds, didn't expect to see you here after that fiasco with the data breach." Thomas Chen, his former Stanford classmate and current director of quantum systems, clapped him on the shoulder with false camaraderie. "Managed to stop the client hemorrhage yet?" Blake forced a smile, drawing on years of pretending things were under control. "We're restructuring, implementing new security protocols." Thomas laughed, the sound tinged with the particular cruelty reserved for former equals now fallen from grace. "Well, if you want to fix the damage, you're looking at the solution right there." He nodded toward Maya, who was now speaking with Microsoft's CEO. "Johnson Digital Solutions, best in the business. Though I heard you rejected their proposal, right? Expensive pride, my friend." Blake swallowed hard, his collar suddenly too tight. "You know Maya Johnson personally?" "Not as well as I'd like," Thomas replied with a smirk. "The woman's a phenomenon. Built that company from nothing while raising a daughter solo. The girl's a genius too, reinventing malware detection at 14. Unbelievable." Before Blake could respond, the lights dimmed, signaling the start of the program. He found himself rooted in place as the conference host took the stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 20th Annual Tech Summit America." The host's enthusiastic voice filled the ballroom. "We have an extraordinary program this year, beginning with our keynote speaker, a visionary who has revolutionized digital security and built a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that protects 70% of Fortune 500 companies. Please welcome the CEO and founder of Johnson Digital Solutions, Maya Johnson." The applause was thunderous as Maya ascended the steps to the stage, her red dress catching the spotlight. Blake remained frozen, unable to tear his eyes away as she took position at the center of the stage, surveying the audience with the ease of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "Security isn't just about codes and firewalls," Maya began, her voice rich and confident. "It's about predicting vulnerabilities before they become catastrophes. It's about building solid foundations even when everyone tells you that you don't belong in the building." Blake felt each word like a personal indictment, though Maya had yet to look in his direction. Her presentation moved seamlessly between technical brilliance and accessible metaphors, holding the audience rapt as she outlined the future of digital security in an interconnected world. The giant screens behind her displayed data visualizations that transformed complex security concepts into compelling narratives of risk and protection. Maya moved across the stage with purpose, her gestures precise, her examples drawing appreciative murmurs from the assembled tech leaders. For 40 minutes, she commanded the room with unquestionable authority, detailed technical innovations, presented compelling data, and elicited laughter at perfectly timed moments. Blake watched as CEOs who had dismissed his recent pitches nodded along with Maya's every point, many taking notes like eager students. Then came the moment that made Blake truly understand the magnitude of what he had lost. "Innovation frequently comes from unexpected places," Maya continued, her voice softening slightly but carrying an intensity that silenced the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, innovation doesn't only emerge from privileged backgrounds, but from resilience forged in hardship, something I learned when I was abandoned pregnant by a man who believed my skin color would determine my potential. A murmur rippled through the audience. Blake felt sweat beading at his temples, certain that every eye in the room had turned toward him, though no one knew he was the man referenced. This man told me that a black girl from South Side had no place in his corporate world, that I was a miscalculation. Maya paused, allowing the words to hover in the air. Today, I'm proud to introduce living proof that he was wrong in every possible way. My daughter, accepted to Stanford on full scholarship at 14, creator of a revolutionary algorithm protecting against emerging threats, Zoe Johnson. The teenager rose from her front row seat and joined her mother on stage amid enthusiastic applause. Without a trace of nervousness, she began her presentation, explaining complex AI concepts with a clarity that left the audience visibly impressed. Blake watched, paralyzed, as the daughter he'd never known demonstrated a brilliance that triggered spontaneous applause when she executed a live demonstration of her system detecting and neutralizing a simulated attack in real time. As you can see, Zoe explained, pointing to data streams on the massive screen, the algorithm identifies pattern anomalies 27 seconds before traditional security systems recognize the threat signature, creating a crucial window for preemptive countermeasures. The audience erupted in applause again, several attendees rising to their feet. On stage, Maya placed a proud hand on Zoe's shoulder, their matching smiles illuminated by the spotlight. When they left the stage together, Blake pushed desperately through the crowd, determined to reach them. He managed to get within 15 feet before two men in dark suits with discreet earpieces stepped into his path. "Excuse me, I need to speak with Maya," Blake said, trying to step around them. "Sorry, sir. Restricted access to the VIP area," one security officer stated firmly, blocking his movement. "You don't understand, I'm an old friend." The desperation in Blake's voice was palpable. The security guard consulted his tablet briefly. "Mr. Reynolds? Blake Reynolds?" "Yes, exactly," Blake replied, hope flaring momentarily. "I'm sorry, sir. Your name is on the restricted access list. You're not authorized to approach Ms. Johnson or her daughter. I'll have to ask you to step back." Blake's face drained of color. "Restricted access list? That's ridiculous. I am the father of Zoe?" the guard completed, contempt evident in his eyes. "Yes, we know exactly who you are. Now please step back, or we'll need to escort you from the event." Throughout the remainder of the conference, Blake made repeated attempts to approach Maya, each time finding his path blocked by security personnel, assistants, or executives monopolizing her attention. From a distance, he observed her navigating the event with absolute command, closing deals, giving interviews, accepting congratulations. At the final reception, when the ballroom had begun to empty, Blake spotted his opportunity. Maya stood alone briefly, checking something on her smartphone. "Maya," he said softly, finally close enough to speak. She looked up slowly, no surprise registering in her expression, only a calculated coldness that hit him like an Arctic wind. "Blake Reynolds," she responded, her voice perfectly controlled. "I figured you'd eventually try to approach." "You knew I would be here?" he asked, suddenly uncertain. "I receive detailed reports on all participants at events where I speak, particularly those who represent potential threats." "Threats? Maya, I just want to talk. Is Zoe my daughter?" Maya regarded him with an expression mixing indifference and slight boredom. "Biologically? Yes. In every other aspect that matters? No. Zoe doesn't have a father, Blake. She has a mother who did the work of two parents, a multi-billion-dollar company as her legacy, and a brilliant future that you're not part of." While Maya received offers of partnership that would add billions to her fortune, Blake finally understood the true value of what he had discarded 15 years ago. Not just a brilliant woman, but also the daughter who could have saved his company and his legacy. Blake stood frozen as Maya's words cut through him with surgical precision. Around them, the final reception of the tech summit continued, oblivious to the seismic confrontation occurring in their midst. Tech executives networked, champagne flutes clinked, deals were brokered, all while Blake Reynolds faced the consequences of his cruelest decision. "I need to know her," Blake insisted, his voice hoarse with desperation. "She's my daughter, too." Maya's expression remained impassive, her posture relaxed yet commanding in her crimson Valentino. "Need? You surrendered any claim to need 15 years ago, Blake. Let me refresh your memory." She leaned slightly closer, her voice dropping to ensure only he could hear. "You said, and I quote, 'Choose a reasonable number or leave with nothing.' You tried to pay me to get rid of the problem. That problem is now a mathematical genius about to attend Stanford." Blake winced as his own words returned to haunt him. "I was wrong, so terribly wrong. I was scared and selfish and now you're failing," Maya finished for him, her gaze briefly flicking to his slightly too loose suit, the telltale signs of stress around his eyes. "Your company is hemorrhaging value, your reputation is in tatters, and suddenly you remember you have a brilliant daughter. How convenient." "That's not fair," Blake protested, running a hand through his prematurely graying hair. "I'm not here for money or connections. I just want to know her." Maya's laugh was brief and cutting. "Fair? You want to discuss fairness now? Where was your concern for fairness when I was working 3 jobs with swollen feet while pregnant? When I was choosing between textbooks and diapers? When I was coding at 3 in the morning with Zoe asleep beside my desk?" Before Blake could respond, they were interrupted by a tech journalist approaching with recorder in hand. "Ms. Johnson, your keynote was revolutionary. Could I get a quick statement about your security predictions for next year?" "Of course," Maya replied smoothly, her professional mask sliding seamlessly into place. "I'll join you at the media table in 2 minutes." As the journalist moved away, Maya turned back to Blake, her voice cool and efficient. "This conversation is over. Do not approach Zoe. Do not attempt to contact her. My security team has clear instructions." Blake stepped closer, desperation evident in every line of his body. "Maya, please. 5 minutes. Just let me introduce myself." "The way you introduced yourself to me 15 years ago?" Maya's perfect composure slipped for a millisecond, revealing the depth of anger still simmering beneath her success. "You had your chance to be a father. You chose your precious corporate future instead." Across the room, Zoe emerged from a cluster of admirers, making her way toward Maya with purposeful strides. Blake's heart raced as he watched his daughter approach, this extraordinary person who carried his DNA but had been shaped entirely by the woman he had discarded. "Mom!" Zoe called, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mr. Nakamura from Sony wants to discuss implementing my algorithm in their systems." "Can I?" Maya's transformation was immediate and complete, her cold expression melting into genuine warmth as she turned to her daughter. "Of course, sweetheart. Ask Caroline to accompany you. I'll be there in a minute." As Zoe nodded and moved away, Blake stared after her with undisguised longing. "She's incredible, Maya. She seems so intelligent, so confident. As I said, she didn't need you to be exceptional." Maya watched Zoe disappear into the crowd before turning back to Blake, her expression hardening once more. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have several billion-dollar partnerships to finalize." Blake reached out, not quite touching her arm. "Please, give me a chance. One conversation. I want to know her, to make up for lost time." Maya studied him for a long moment, her analytical mind visibly calculating variables and outcomes. Finally, she reached into her purse and extracted a business card, holding it between 2 manicured fingers. "My assistant can schedule 15 minutes in my calendar next quarter. Exactly the time you dedicated to dismissing me from your life, Blake Reynolds." With those words, she walked away, leaving him clutching her card as though it were a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Blake stood alone in the thinning crowd, watching Maya rejoin Zoe and the Sony executives. The contrast couldn't have been starker, Maya radiant in success, commanding respect from the industry's most powerful figures, while he clutched a card that promised 15 minutes of grudging attention 3 months in the future. Outside the Four Seasons, Blake declined the valet's offer to call him a car. Despite the late hour and the beginning of a light rain, he needed to walk to process the earthquake that had just shattered his carefully reconstructed life. His hotel room, when he finally returned, felt even smaller and shabbier than before. The minibar beckoned, but Blake ignored it, knowing alcohol would only dull the edges of a pain he deserved to feel fully. Instead, he opened his laptop and typed Zoe Johnson into the search bar. The results overwhelmed him. Academic papers authored by a 14-year-old, technology conference presentations, interviews where industry leaders praised her innovations. In each photograph, he could see traces of himself, the shape of her eyes, the slight asymmetry of her smile, the way she gestured when explaining complex concepts. But her brilliance, her poise, her confident demeanor, those were all Maya's gifts to their daughter. Blake's phone rang at 2 a.m, his board chairman calling from California. "Reynolds, what the hell happened today? Nakamura just emailed to say he's no longer interested in the partnership, said he found a more innovative solution with Johnson Digital Solutions." Blake closed his eyes, the final piece falling into place. "It's Zoe's algorithm. He saw her demonstration." "Who the hell is Zoe?" the chairman barked. "Fix this, Blake. This was our last lifeline." After hanging up, Blake stared at the ceiling, the irony crushing him. The daughter he had rejected as a strategic disaster had just delivered the final blow to the company he had prioritized over her existence. Dawn found him still awake, his hotel room littered with printouts of articles about Maya and Zoe. He shaved carefully, studying his haggard reflection, the lines etched by stress, the gray hair that had appeared seemingly overnight, the hollow look in eyes that had once radiated confidence. The morning news played in the background as he dressed, the business channel reporting on the tech summit's highlights. Johnson Digital Solutions stock jumped 12% following yesterday's groundbreaking presentation by CEO Maya Johnson and her daughter Zoe, whose security algorithm is being hailed as a paradigm shift in threat detection. Blake's phone began ringing incessantly as the business day began on the West Coast. Investors demanded explanations for Nakamura's withdrawal. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. Journalists requested comments on the company's declining prospects. He ignored them all, focusing instead on Maya's business card, running his thumb over the embossed JDS Shield logo. After 5 attempts to reach her private number went straight to voicemail, Blake finally called the executive assistant line. "Johnson Digital Solutions, Office of Maya Johnson," answered a crisp, professional voice. "This is Blake Reynolds," he said, surprised by the tremor in his voice. "Maya said I could schedule 15 minutes with her." A brief pause. "Ah, yes, Mr. Reynolds. Ms. Johnson mentioned you might call. Let me check her calendar." The sound of typing filled the silence. The first available slot would be August 17th at 10:45. "August?" Blake nearly shouted. "That's 3 months away. I need to see her sooner than that." "I'm sorry, sir. Ms. Johnson's schedule is extremely full. 15 minutes is the maximum I can offer at this time." Defeated, Blake accepted the appointment, immediately marking it in his own calendar before collapsing onto the hotel bed. That afternoon, he faced a video conference with the Reynolds Innovation Board of Directors, their expressions grim as they appeared on his laptop screen. In light of recent developments and ongoing concerns about leadership direction, the board has voted to place you on administrative leave, effective immediately, the chairman announced without preamble, until the situation stabilizes. Blake nodded numbly, having expected this outcome since watching Zoe demonstrate her algorithm on stage. "I understand." Over the following weeks, Blake watched helplessly as his reputation disintegrated. Each attempt to contact Maya was blocked. Gifts sent to Zoe were returned unopened. A desperate email explaining his side of the story received only an automated response. "This account does not accept personal communications." Meanwhile, Johnson Digital Solutions announced global expansion, opening offices in Tokyo, London, and Singapore. Zoe Johnson appeared on the cover of Teen Vogue labeled as the next great tech innovator. Maya closed a strategic partnership with Microsoft valued at $500 million. The contrast between their trajectories couldn't have been more stark. While Maya and Zoe ascended to new heights of success and recognition, Blake's life contracted. Former colleagues stopped returning his calls. Invitations to industry events dried up. His temporary removal from leadership became permanent when the board accepted an acquisition offer that valued Reynolds' innovation at less than 20% of its worth 5 years earlier. When August 17th finally arrived, Blake was at the Johnson Digital Solutions building an hour early, his best suit freshly pressed, carrying a leather portfolio and a small wrapped package. Security escorted him through the impressive lobby, where the JDS logo dominated the marble wall behind the reception desk. The elevator whisked him to the 45th floor, where another security team checked his identification before leading him to a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the Empire State Building. At precisely 10:45, Maya entered, wearing an impeccable white suit that contrasted dramatically with her dark skin. She was accompanied by 2 men. One Blake recognized as her corporate attorney, the other appeared to be an assistant taking notes. "Mr. Reynolds," she greeted him formally, taking the seat at the head of the table. "Your 15 minutes begin now." Blake glanced nervously at the other men. "I was hoping we could talk privately." "This is a business meeting, not a personal reunion," Maya replied, consulting her watch. 14 minutes and 40 seconds. Blake took a deep breath. "Maya, I've come to beg for a chance to know my daughter. I know I don't deserve it, but—" "Correct. You don't deserve it," Maya interrupted. "But this isn't about what you deserve. It's about protecting Zoe." Protecting her? From her own father? From a man who rejected her before she was even born? A man who called her an error in calculation? A man who offered money to solve the problem? Maya's voice remained controlled, but her eyes burned. "My daughter is extraordinary, Blake. She has an IQ of 158, speaks 4 languages, develops algorithms that technology companies are competing to license. She doesn't need the emotional complication you would represent in her life." While journalists speculated about the identity of the man who had abandoned Maya Johnson during her pregnancy, Blake Reynolds sat in a luxurious hotel bar, staring into a glass of untouched scotch, finally understanding that his greatest loss wasn't his company's value, but the chance to know the extraordinary young woman who carried his genes but not his failures. The Wall Street Journal headline glared from Blake's tablet with merciless clarity. "Tech industry rumor confirmed. Blake Reynolds identified as father who abandoned billionaire Maya Johnson during pregnancy." The article detailed their relationship timeline with journalistic precision, citing sources close to both parties, who confirmed Blake had dismissed Maya when she revealed her pregnancy, even offering money to resolve the situation. Blake closed the browser, his hand trembling slightly. The Tech Summit confrontation had occurred just 8 days ago, but the fallout had been swift and devastating. What began as industry whispers had exploded into mainstream news after someone, Blake suspected a former colleague who'd overheard his conversation with Maya, leaked the story to a technology blog. His phone rang for the 17th time that morning. The caller ID displayed Vanessa Sinclair, his fiancée of 11 months. Blake stared at the screen, knowing exactly what the call would entail. Vanessa, heiress to the Sinclair oil fortune and fixture in Texas society pages, had texted him 37 increasingly frantic messages since the story broke. "Blake, for God's sake, answer your phone!" Her voice crackled with fury when he finally answered. "I'm being hounded by reporters asking if I knew my fiancé had a secret daughter. A black daughter. You told me you never had children. Vanessa, I can explain." "Explain what? That you abandoned a pregnant woman and then lied to me about it? That you've been hiding a 14-year-old genius from me? My parents are furious. How am I supposed to show my face at the Met Gala this weekend?" Blake closed his eyes, recognizing the familiar sound of his world collapsing. "I made a terrible mistake 15 years ago. I was trying to protect. Save it for your PR team. The ring is going in a safety deposit box. My lawyer will contact yours." The call ended abruptly. The announcement of their split appeared in page 6 2 days later, accompanied by an unflattering photo of Blake leaving his New York hotel, looking haggard and unshaven. The caption read, "Heiress dumps disgraced tech CEO after secret daughter revelation." In his temporary apartment, he could no longer afford the Manhattan penthouse he'd maintained for years. Blake stared at Maya's business card for the 100th time. After 5 attempts to reach her private number, all sent to voicemail, he finally dialed the main office line again. "I need to move up my appointment," he told her assistant, desperation evident in his voice. "The situation has become urgent." "I understand your concern, Mr. Reynolds," the assistant replied with practiced neutrality. "But Ms. Johnson's schedule remains fully committed. Your August 17th appointment stands." That evening, Blake received a formal email from the Reynolds Innovation Board of Directors. The temporary administrative leave had become permanent. The company his grandfather had founded in a garage in 1967, that his father had expanded into a technology leader through the 90s, would be sold to a private equity firm and broken into pieces. His legacy would vanish as if it had never existed. Blake barely registered the blow. His mind remained fixed on Zoe, the daughter whose existence he had once tried to erase, now recognized as one of the most brilliant young minds in technology. He scoured the internet for everything available about her: academic papers written at 12, conference presentations, the MIT Technology Review profile. In each video, he could see his own mannerisms reflected back: the way she tilted her head when concentrating, the precise hand gestures when explaining complex concepts. In a desperate attempt to establish some connection, Blake sent a package to the Johnson Digital Solutions headquarters, an antique first-edition collection of mathematical texts that had belonged to his grandfather. The package was returned the next day, unopened, with a printed note. "All unsolicited communications are being documented. This constitutes your first warning." 3 weeks after the tech summit, Blake sat in his attorney's office, signing the final papers surrendering control of Reynolds Innovation. As the pen scratched across the signature line formally ending his family's 73-year business legacy, Blake felt strangely numb. The company that had once seemed worth sacrificing everything for, even his own child, now felt hollow and insignificant compared to what he had lost. "The terms are as favorable as could be expected given the circumstances," his attorney explained, organizing the documents into folders. "The severance should sustain you comfortably while you regroup." Blake nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. "I need your advice on another matter. I have a daughter. I've never been part of her life. Her mother has significant reasons to keep me away. What are my legal rights?" The attorney's expression shifted from professional to cautious. "This would be the Johnson girl?" "I've read the papers, Blake. Yes, I want to know her, to be part of her life somehow." The attorney leaned back, choosing his words carefully. Even under normal circumstances, courts prioritize the child's stability and well-being over parental desires. Given your documented rejection, the 15-year absence, and Ms. Johnson's resources, pursuing this legally would be costly, public, and almost certainly unsuccessful. He paused. Not to mention potentially traumatic for the child. "She's my daughter," Blake insisted. "Biologically, yes, but you'd be asking a court to force a relationship between a 14-year-old prodigy and a father who explicitly rejected her before birth. A father who, according to public reports, offered money to terminate her existence." The attorney shook his head. "No judge would rule in your favor, especially against someone with Maya Johnson's resources and reputation." The weeks crawled by. Blake's former colleagues stopped returning calls. Industry events that had once courted his attendance now pointedly failed to send invitations. His social circle, built largely around his corporate status and relationship with Vanessa, evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. Reynolds' innovation officially ceased to exist on a rainy Tuesday in July, the company's assets divided and absorbed by competitors. Blake watched the CNBC coverage from a sports bar near his downsized apartment, nursing a beer as financial analysts discussed the inevitable downfall of a once promising legacy company that failed to innovate in the security space. With bitter irony, he noted that Johnson Digital Solutions stock had risen 9% that same day after announcing a new government contract. As August 17th approached, Blake prepared meticulously for his 15 minutes with Maya. He drafted talking points, rehearsed apologies, and prepared documents relinquishing any legal claims to Zoe while requesting only limited supervised contact. He also carefully wrapped his grandmother's gold medallion, a family heirloom over 100 years old that had been earmarked for his first daughter. On the appointed morning, Blake arrived at the Johnson Digital Solutions headquarters dressed in his most conservative suit. The building seemed even more imposing than before, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the summer sunlight, the company logo prominently displayed in the lobby. Security processed him efficiently but coldly, escorting him to the same conference room with its spectacular view of Manhattan. Maya arrived precisely on time, again accompanied by her attorney and assistant. Her white pantsuit projected power and purity, a stark contrast to Blake's slightly worn navy blue ensemble. "Mr. Reynolds," she acknowledged with professional detachment, "your 15 minutes begin now." Blake opened his portfolio, hands slightly unsteady. "I've prepared some documents. I'm renouncing any legal claims to Zoe. I don't want money. I don't want public acknowledgement. I just want to know her, perhaps occasional dinners, to hear about her life. Please." Maya didn't even glance at the papers. 9 minutes remaining. Desperation pushed Blake to try another approach. "Haven't you ever wondered if she might want to know who her father is? If she has the right to decide for herself?" Something flickered in Maya's eyes, the first genuine emotion she had displayed. Zoe knows that her biological father chose not to be part of her life. She has positive male role models around her, mentors, teachers, my brother who moved from Chicago to help when she was 5. She hasn't lacked for anything. "Except the complete truth," Blake pressed, sensing the smallest opening. Maya leaned forward, finally showing emotion beyond calculated indifference, contained anger. "The complete truth? You want me to tell her that her father said a black girl from South Side has no place in his corporate future in Silicon Valley? That he considered his own daughter an obstacle to his career? How exactly would that truth benefit her?" Blake paled. "I was an arrogant, prejudiced fool. I'm not that person anymore." "No," Maya agreed, her voice cutting. "Now you're just a failed executive trying to grasp at any connection that might restore your relevance. That's not fair. I'm not after your money." Maya laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Money? Blake, you truly don't comprehend the magnitude of what you lost, do you? It's not just about money. Johnson Digital Solutions is worth 10 times what your father's company was at its peak. My daughter holds patents that will be worth billions in the coming years." She paused, studying him with something approaching pity. "But more important than that, you missed watching this amazing girl grow up. You missed her first smile, first step, first word. You missed reading bedtime stories, playground days, fevers and nightmares. You missed the privilege of being called father by the most brilliant person I've ever known." Blake couldn't contain the tears that welled in his eyes. "Please, Maya, I'm begging you." 5 minutes, she responded, implacable. Defeated, Blake reached for the small wrapped package he had brought. "This belonged to my grandmother. It's a gold medallion over 100 years old. She said it should go to my first daughter. Even if Zoe never knows who I am, I'd like her to have this." Maya hesitated for the first time, looking at the small package. After a moment, she gestured to her assistant, who collected the gift. "I'll consider giving this to her at an appropriate time." "Thank you," Blake whispered, genuine gratitude in his voice. And if someday she wants to know me? If someday she asks about me? Maya stood, indicating that the meeting was over, though 3 minutes remained on her timer. If Zoe ever expresses genuine interest in meeting you, I won't prevent it. That will be her choice, when she's old enough to fully understand what it means. When would that be? When she turns 18, perhaps. Until then, maintain your distance, Blake. No unauthorized contacts, no more gifts, no appearances at events where you know we'll be. My lawyers are prepared to request restraining orders if necessary. 3 months later, Blake Reynolds formally resigned from what remained of Reynolds Innovation after the board accepted an acquisition offer for a fraction of its original value. The company his grandfather founded and his father expanded would be dismembered, the brand dissolved, the family legacy reduced to a footnote in American technology history. Meanwhile, across the country, Maya Johnson inaugurated the new Johnson Digital Solutions campus in Palo Alto, ironically, just a few miles from where Blake had planned to buy his mansion 15 years earlier. At her side, Zoe smiled for the cameras, wearing a discreet gold medallion around her neck, a gift her mother said had belonged to someone who believed in her future. In the media coverage of the event, one photograph captured particular attention. Maya and Zoe, hand in hand, identical smiles, with the California sunset in the background. The perfect image of a future built against all odds, without the shadow of a man who had once considered both insufficient for his world. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.